Remember when your favorite band lived in your TV and drove to gigs in a psychedelic school bus? From 1970 to 1974 on ABC, the Partridge Family turned primetime into a rolling pop concert. A widowed mom with Broadway pipes, 5 kids with suspiciously perfect harmonies, and one multicolored bus that looked like it lost a fight with a paint factory. Starring Shirley Jones, David Cassidy, Susan Day, Danny Bonaduce, and a cast of kids who absolutely looked like they were playing their own instruments. They weren't, but we'll get to that. The show blended sitcom sweetness with bubblegum pop that was so catchy that at one point they were outselling the Beatles on the singles chart. But behind the tambourines and matching vests, session musicians, real family drama, a mailroom that operated at federal scale, and a teen idol who wasn't sure he wanted to be one. Today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about the Partridge Family, the kind that make you rewatch The Painted Bus a little bit differently. But before we start, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. And stick around for number 1, because it completely changes how you see the grumpiest manager in TV history. Now come on, get happy, and let's get into it. Number 15, the Milli Vanilli of 1970. Velvet suits, tambourine shaking in perfect rhythm, the Partridge Kids harmonizing like they just stepped out of pop heaven. Yeah, about that. Aside from Shirley Jones, legit Broadway royalty, and David Cassidy, who basically strong-armed producers into letting him sing, the rest of the cast didn't play instruments on those records and contributed little to no studio vocals. The tracks, well, they were laid down by top-tier LA session musicians, many of them associated with the legendary Wrecking Crew, the same players behind Pet Sounds and a mountain of 60s hits. That bass line on I Think I Love You, yeah, that's not coming from a wisecracking redheaded kid. That was elite chart-dominating muscle. And those big, glossy harmonies floating behind the chorus, the Ron Hicklin singers. Basically the vocal cheat code for half of 1970s TV. So yeah, Milli Vanilli of the early 70s. The music was actually phenomenal. I Think I Love You hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that November, putting a fictional TV family at the top of the same chart that the Beatles had dominated. And we didn't question it for a second. 50 years later, and we're still humming it. That's the kind of con job that you just have to respect. Number 14, the real-life Partridges who weren't. The Partridge Family wasn't cooked up from scratch. The concept was heavily inspired by a very real band, the Cowsills. Actual siblings, actual hits. The Rain, The Park, and Other Things, Hair, late 60s bubblegum gold. Producers at Screen Gems saw them and thought, hey, that's a concept. And according to members of the Cowsills, early discussions floated the idea of involving the real band in the show. So what happened? Mom happened. The studio wanted star power. They had their sights set on Shirley Jones, an Oscar winner, Broadway legend, legit pipes. According to the band, the Cowsill kids were open to it, but only if their real mother, Barbara Cowsill, was included on screen. And the studio said, nope. Cowsills? Well, they said no deal. And just like that, Hollywood did what Hollywood does best. They kept the concept and swapped the family. They hired Shirley Jones, they cast actors as the kids, found a bus, painted it, and built a fictionalized version inspired by a real band story. Meanwhile, the actual Cowsills watched a TV family loosely based on them become a merchandising juggernaut. One conversation changed pop culture history. Somewhere in Newport, Rhode Island, that has to sting just a little. Number 13, the secret family tree. Now here's something that most fans never picked up on. Shirley Jones, the TV mom, was David Cassidy's actual stepmother in real life. She was married to his father, who was a Tony-winning Broadway performer, Jack Cassidy. Producers have said that David won the role through auditions and screen tests, though the fact that his real-life stepmom was already cast certainly didn't hurt. But once cameras started rolling, the dynamic got weird and fast. Think about it. You're 19 when the show premieres, and you're becoming one of the biggest teen idols in the world. Girls are screaming your name in every city, and your stepmom is just standing right there on set, playing your mother, watching the whole thing unfold under studio lights. In his autobiography and later interviews, Cassidy acknowledged that fame, combined with complicated family dynamics, created real tension behind the scenes, even if it never spilled into the show itself. Despite the weirdness, the two kept it professional. Shirley brought Broadway-level discipline to every scene, and David matched it. Whatever was strange about the situation stayed off camera. Number 12, the accidental icon. When the Partridge Family went into production at Screen Gems, singing wasn't part of the plan for David Cassidy. Show up, look the part, mouth the words, collect the check. Every note was already covered by studio pros. Except Cassidy had grown up around music. He worshipped Hendrix. He listened to B.B. King. And when producers led him into the recording booth during the early sessions, what he described later as almost a formality, he walked out with something nobody expected, an actual voice. tone, grit, and a pop instinct that you can't fake with session singers. Producers pivoted fast. Cassidy became the real lead voice on the records. Albums flew off the shelves. By 1972, he was everywhere. Lunchboxes, pillowcases, sold-out arenas across the globe. At his peak, some estimates had him outselling every solo artist in America. Yesterday, I have forgotten smile. The fictional kid from a fictional band had become one of the most bankable entertainers on the planet. But that level of fame has a cost. And on May 26th of 1974, it came due. White City Stadium in London. An estimated 30 to 35,000 fans packed in. When Cassidy hit the stage, the crowd surged forward. It turned into chaos. Hundreds were treated for injuries, with over 100 hospitalized. A 14-year-old fan, Bernadette Whalen, later died from injuries sustained in the crush. It shook the UK, and it deeply affected Cassidy. He later said that he felt like a piece of merchandise. That's not drama. That's exhaustion. He wanted to be taken seriously as a musician, but instead his face was stamped on merch while teenagers were getting hurt in stadium aisles. After the show ended, Cassidy chased solo albums with more depth, acting roles with more range, Vegas residencies that kept him working but never recaptured that rocket fuel. The teen idol label stuck like duct tape. No matter what he did, the world kept pulling him back to Keith Partridge and that painted bus. Number 11, the tragic fate of the painted bus. If the Partridge Family had a mascot, it wasn't Danny's wisecracks or even Keith's hair. It was that bus. The multicolored Chevrolet school bus, often described as Mondrian-inspired, became one of the most recognizable vehicles on 1970s television. It wasn't built as a showpiece. It was a used school bus purchased from the Orange County School District for roughly $500. Repainted and customized for the series, and transformed into a rolling pop culture billboard with better branding than most actual rock bands.
My stomach.
Why?
I keep seeing this headline in Variety. Partridges lay an egg.
For 4 seasons, it carried the come on get happy fantasy. Then, the show got canceled, and the bus, it just vanished. After the series wrapped in 1974, the bus was reportedly repainted white and recycled into another production, Apple's Way, filmed on the same lot. From there, the trail goes cold. There were reported sightings behind a taco shop near USC through the early 80s, though fans and Chevy enthusiasts have debated for years whether that was the original or just a replica with a similar paint job. By 1987, one bus matching the description was reportedly towed from that location and sent to a scrapyard. But was it the bus? Well, nobody's been able to confirm it. Multiple replicas were built over the years, for Bell Record Promotions, for a Nick at Night campaign, and for a 1999 TV movie. And they've all been getting mistaken for the original ever since. Even Shirley Jones said that she's not sure where the real one ended up. One of the most recognizable vehicles in television history, and nobody can say for certain what happened to it. No confirmed restoration, no museum, no definitive scrap record, just decades of debate, replica sightings, and a mystery that Partridge fans are still arguing about online. Hollywood giveth, and Hollywood loseth track of its own props. Number 10, the 30,000-letter avalanche. Before going viral meant a trending hashtag, it meant overwhelming the U.S. Postal Service. At the height of Partridge Mania in the early 70s, press reports estimated that David Cassidy was receiving anywhere from 20 to 30,000 fan letters a week, sometimes more. His official fan club swelled into the hundreds of thousands worldwide, and the volume became so overwhelming that studio staff were brought in to handle sorting and responses. Bins of perfumed envelopes, marriage proposals, hand-drawn portraits, and, yes, the occasional lock of hair. If you lived anywhere from Des Moines to Dusseldorf, odds are someone on your block mailed something to that guy. Like most major teen idols of that era, Cassidy couldn't possibly read more than a fraction of what arrived. Meanwhile, teen magazines ran advice columns and Q&As under his name, often written or heavily shaped by editors, which is a common industry practice that most fans had no idea about. Imagine pouring your 14-year-old soul into pink stationery, and somewhere in Hollywood, a studio staffer that you'll never meet is the only person who ever opens it. Today, celebrities measure engagement in likes and comments. In 1971, Cassidy measured it in truckloads, and most of those truckloads went unread. Number 9, the Oscar winner who had to dial it down. Now, before she was America's grooviest TV matriarch, Shirley Jones had already won an Oscar for Elmer Gantry and headlined big-screen musicals like Oklahoma, Carousel, and The Music Man. She's a classically trained soprano, discovered by Rodgers and Hammerstein, the kind of voice that fills a theater without a microphone. Recording for the Partridge Family meant adapting that Broadway power to a lighter and radio-friendly sound built around Cassidy, the new lead's vocals. Next to the breezy, sunshine pop production, her full-force delivery sounded like Carnegie Hall had wandered into a garage band rehearsal. So she made a choice. She toned it down.
You're my best girl, and nothing you do is wrong. I'm proud you belong to me.
In interviews, Jones has acknowledged adjusting her delivery, softening the vibrato, flattening the phrasing, leaning into a gentler pop style. Instead of belting to the balcony, she blended. An Oscar winner choosing restraint so the family band sounded believable, and most of us never noticed. That's the flex. She was calibrating her instrument in real time, giving the songs warmth and credibility without overpowering the sound. Hey, if you're still here, chances are you either own the lunchbox, you had the poster, or you tried to convince your parents that you needed a tambourine. Drop it in the comments, and hit that like button too. It helps the channel more than you think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. We've got plenty more where this came from. All right, let's get back on the bus. Number 8, the Laurie and Keith paradox. On screen, Laurie and Keith Partridge were peak TV siblings. Eye rolls, inside jokes, harmonies tighter than their bell-bottoms. But off-screen, it was more complicated. Susan Dey was 16 when she was cast, 17 when the show premiered. According to David Cassidy's 1994 memoir, Come On Get Happy, she developed a teenage crush on him during the early seasons. In the book, Cassidy wrote that he didn't return her feelings and felt conflicted about the imbalance, particularly as his teen idol fame exploded. In later interviews, he acknowledged that discussing it publicly may have strained things between them. Do the math. You're a teenager, you work 12-hour days on a soundstage, your crush plays your brother, and the whole world is also in love with him. After the show ended in 1974, Dey largely stepped away from the Partridge nostalgia circuit. She skipped most reunion specials and retrospectives, though she did surface for the occasional anniversary interview or media appearance over the years. But her focus was clearly forward. She went on to build a serious acting career, most notably a Golden Globe-winning run on L.A. Law, and has remained notably private about her personal life. It doesn't rewrite the show, but knowing that at least part of that on-screen dynamic came from very real teenage emotions adds a layer. It's not scandal, not melodrama, just adolescents playing out under studio lights in front of all of America. Number 7, the day the bus broke the stratosphere. By 1974, the Partridge Family was winding down, and the network faced the eternal TV question. How do we keep selling this thing after the kids outgrow the haircuts? Answer? Send them to space. Not metaphorically, but literally. Enter Partridge Family 2200 AD, produced by Hanna-Barbera. Because if anyone could launch a folk pop family into the future, it was the people who gave us talking dogs and cavemen with appliances. Suddenly, San Pueblo was out, and the 23rd century was in. Flying vehicles, futuristic gadgets, a space-age version of the famous bus, same bell-bottom energy.
Hey! It's the tidal wave!
What's going on? Somebody do something!
Turn it off!
Uh-oh. Danny's invented another gadget.
David Cassidy opted out entirely, and he was replaced by a sound-alike. Susan Dey voiced Laurie for 2 episodes before bowing out, replaced by former Mouseketeer Sherry Alberoni. Shirley Jones didn't return either, with her character voiced by actress Joan Gerber. But Danny Bonaduce, in. Susan Crowe, in. Brian Forster, in.
Well, there goes Plan A. What do we do now? Bow wow, rough.
This aired 16 episodes, which, look, in 70s cartoon math, that's basically a polite shrug. But it pretty perfectly captured the era. The 70s loved taking wholesome sitcom brands and strapping rockets to them. If you had a hit, well, the next logical step was apparently a lunar colony. Number 6, the revolving door of Partridge Kids. Be honest, did you notice when Chris Partridge changed faces overnight? In season 1, the youngest brother, the kid behind the drums, was played by Jeremy Gelbwicks. Shy vibe, classic bowl cut, very 70s elementary school picture day. Then, season 2 comes around, and suddenly Chris looks different. There's no dramatic exit, no he's at summer camp, just a new kid. Enter Brian Forster, sliding onto the drum stool like he'd always been there. It was pre-internet too, so no one was writing angry letters to the network about it. We just shrugged and said, Chris grew. Behind the scenes, reports suggest that Gelbwick's family relocated during the hiatus, and other behind-the-scenes factors may have played a role. Either way, in 70s network TV, continuity was more of a suggestion than a rule. If the vest fit, you're hired. But the revolving door didn't stop at the drum stool. By season 4, ratings were sliding, so producers pulled a classic sitcom move. Add a cute kid. Enter Ricky Siegel. 4 years old, mop top, and suddenly everywhere. He played Ricky Stevens, who was the neighbor kid who materialized into the Partridge orbit like he'd always been there. No long setup, no emotional arc, just boom. Tiny scene stealer deployed.
You know it's very wrong to want to harm another person, 'cause someone else's happiness, it's never your misfortune.
Fans noticed the shift, and the tone tilted younger. The whole thing felt like less organic storytelling and more like a network executive pointing at ratings charts and yelling, quick, bring in something with dimples. The show was canceled that same season. When your fictional band starts deploying toddlers, the harmony's already off. Number 5, the Grammy anomaly. Here's one that still makes music purists twitch. In 1971, the Partridge Family, a band that did not exist, was nominated for a Grammy. Not some novelty category, but Best New Artist. The same award that launches real careers and validates real talent. And the Recording Academy looked at a fictional sitcom family powered by session musicians and said, yeah, they qualify. They lost to the Carpenters, Karen and Richard, who could actually, play and sing. But the fact that it even got that far says everything about how blurred the line was between the show and the music. The records were selling, the singles were charting, and apparently nobody at the Recording Academy had a rule on the books that said that your lead guitarist had to be a real person. It's the kind of nomination that raises a question nobody at the Grammys wanted to answer. If the music is real, if the sales are real, and the fans are real, does it matter that the band isn't? The Carpenters took home the trophy, but somewhere in a parallel universe, a painted school bus has a Grammy sitting on the dashboard. Number 4, the secret sitcom universe. The Partridge House looked like the safest, sunniest suburb on earth. White fence, garage band rehearsals, that rainbow bus parked out front, but it wasn't a real home. It was a facade on the Columbia Ranch in Burbank, the same backlot later known as the Warner Brothers Ranch, specifically a stretch of residential street often nicknamed Blondie Street. That one patch of plywood suburbia has hosted some of the most famous sitcom homes in TV history. The exterior used for Bewitched, 1164 Morning Glory Circle, stood on that same street. So did the house scene in I Dream of Jeannie. Not permanently side-by-side in branded form, these were facades redressed and reimagined from production to production, but built on the same stretch of backlot asphalt. So at different points in time, the same sidewalk hosted witches, genies, and a groovy family band with a painted bus. Different shows and different decades, same plywood. Number 3, the theme song that hijacked your brain. Come on, get happy. If I say Partridge Family, you're already humming it. We'll make you happy. Come on, get happy. Yeah, don't fight it. That melody has been parked in your head since childhood, and it ain't leaving. But the thing is, well, what you were singing isn't even the original. When the show debuted in September of 1970, the Partridge Bus wasn't cruising to Come On Get Happy. It was When We're Singing. Same bouncy groove, same sunshine pop energy, just different lyrics. More of a literal Here's Who We Are jam, without any of the sing-along magic that we all grew up yelling at the TV. Come on now and meet everybody and hear us singing. Beginning in season 2, the show's songwriters, Wes Farrell and Danny Jansen, they revised the lyrics, and Come On Get Happy was born. The tune stayed, the words changed, and the new version grabbed kids by the ears and never let go. We get a happy feeling when we're singing a song. Becoming the one lodged in America's collective memory so completely that even diehard fans have to hunt down season 1 episodes to hear the original. It's like hearing a cover of your own childhood performed by strangers. The Partridge Family didn't scrap its theme, it just rewrote it, and ended up with one of the most recognizable earworms in television history. We'll make you happy. Number 2, the guest list that predicted Hollywood. Now, before the Oscars, before the blockbuster posters, before the action figures, some of the biggest stars of the 70s and 80s got their reps by standing awkwardly in the Partridge living room, trying not to get upstaged by Danny Bonaduce. Mark Hamill appeared in a 1971 episode, about 6 years before Star Wars, as a lovesick high schooler crushing on Lori. Shaggy hair, an earnest smile, total farm boy charm. Just not space-related yet. How about Jodie Foster, about 10 years old, guest starring as a kid smitten with Danny? Of course she's already stealing scenes.
Hi, Danny. I've got all of your records. I think you're wonderful.
Already operating on a completely different level from everyone around her. And then there's Richard Pryor, the future king of boundary-pushing stand-up, showing up as a squeaky clean club owner on a family sitcom. Watching him play it straight in primetime suburbia is the kind of casting collision that only the 70s could produce. Farrah Fawcett passed through too, 2 years before she became a household name. Jackie Coogan, Cheryl Ladd. The guest list reads like a who's who of future fame that was just rotating through a family band set. Rewatching those episodes now is like watching Hollywood's farm system in action. That random kid selling a guitar to Keith, well, odds are they ended up with a star on the Walk of Fame. And number 1, the grumpy manager who became a real dad. On screen, Reuben Kincaid and Danny Partridge spent 4 seasons going at it like it was an Olympic sport. Sarcasm, eye rolls, the kind of bickering that made you wonder how they survived a single road trip in that bus. But off-screen, completely different story. Danny Bonaduce has been open about his childhood. In interviews and in his memoir, he's described a turbulent home where stability was hard to come by. But on the set, something unexpected happened. The guy who played his nemesis became, by Bonaduce's own account, the closest thing that he's had to a real father figure. According to Bonaduce, Dave Madden didn't just clock in for tapings and go home. He kept an eye on the kid. He offered guidance. And during difficult stretches in Bonaduce's youth, Madden opened his own home to him. Not as a publicity move, not as like an industry mentorship arrangement, but just a grown man seeing a kid who needed somebody steady and deciding to be that person. What makes it more remarkable is that Madden was notoriously private. He wasn't chasing interviews or leveraging the relationship for attention. He was a working character actor who showed up, nailed the scenes, and quietly made sure that a 10-year-old co-star had somewhere safe to land. No cameras, no headlines, just consistency, which, for a kid in Bonaduce's situation, might have been the most valuable thing anyone on that set could offer. Their bond lasted decades. Long after the Partridge bus stopped rolling and long after both of them had moved on to very different chapters, Bonaduce remained publicly grateful, and he spoke movingly about their relationship following Madden's death in 2014, calling it one of the most important connections of his life. For anyone who grew up watching those two trade insults every week, knowing what was really happening behind the laugh track changes the rewatch entirely. So that's the Partridge Family. If you've got a favorite Partridge memory, a song, an episode, drop it in the comments. We actually do read them. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with whoever you used to watch reruns with. They probably need this trip back to the 70s as much as you did. Until next time, this is Remember When.